High Commander Day 1 paced the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, his claws clicking against the polished floor. The massive view screen before him displayed a rotating image of Earth, a seemingly unremarkable blue-green planet orbiting an average yellow star. Nothing about it suggested danger. Nothing hinted at the power that had swallowed 3 Concord fleets without a trace. "Commander, final preparations are complete," First Officer Hannah reported, approaching with a data tablet. "All 27 warships are in formation and awaiting your command." Day 1 nodded, his scaled face reflecting the blue glow of the tactical displays. And the Council's final message. Hannah's silver eyes narrowed slightly. They reiterated their concerns about sending our flagship. They suggested waiting for reinforcements from the 7th Quadrant, which would take another 60 cycles. Day 1 said dismissively. "By then, the Concorde will have lost face throughout the galaxy. News of our failures has already reached the outer systems." He turned to face his officer directly. "The Vrex Dominion watches us closely, Hannah. They search for any sign of weakness." Around them, the bridge crew worked at their stations, pretending not to listen. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew the stakes. "Display the last known positions of the previous expeditions," Day 1 ordered. The main screen shifted, showing 3 distinct approach vectors toward the Sol system. Each ended abruptly at different points, one near the gas giant Jupiter, another just beyond Mars, and the most recent at the asteroid belt. Each fleet advanced farther than the last, noted Science Director Jin from his station. Perhaps they encountered a defensive perimeter that adjusts based on perceived threat levels. Day 1 considered this, or the entity, whatever it is, was studying us, evaluating our capabilities before allowing closer approach. The theory had merit. The first expedition had been purely scientific, 3 research vessels with minimal weapons. The second included military escorts. The third was a full combat squadron led by Admiral Gaisu, one of the Concorde's most decorated officers. And now Day 1 was bringing the largest force yet, including the Eternal Dominance, the most powerful warship in the Concorde fleet. "Commander," Communications Officer Tai called out. "We're receiving a transmission from High Council Member Kyung." Day 1 straightened his ceremonial armor. "Put it through." The weathered face of Counselor Kyung appeared on screen, his expression grave. "High Commander, this communication serves as your final briefing. The Council remains divided on your mission, but we are united in our concern. The mystery of Earth must be solved." "Counselor," Day 1 replied firmly. "At what cost?" Kyung asked. 3 fleets, over 5,000 of our finest, gone without explanation. This planet defies everything we know about primitive worlds." Day 1 had reviewed the data countless times. Earth's technology remained laughably basic: internal combustion engines, limited space exploration confined to their own moon, and rudimentary probes to nearby planets. Their weapons were chemical-based projectiles and crude nuclear devices. They had no unified planetary government, no orbital defenses, nothing that could threaten even a single Concorde vessel. "Our long-range scans confirm the humans remain unaware of our presence," Day 1 assured the counselor. "Whatever guards them appears to operate independently." Kyung's eyes narrowed. "Some on the council believe we should simply designate Sol as forbidden space and move on. The galaxy is vast. One system matters little." "With respect, Counselor, that would be a dangerous precedent. If we retreat from one mystery, our enemies will note our fear. The Vrex would interpret it as weakness." The mention of their ancient rivals seemed to sway Kyung. The Vrex Dominion had been in a cold war with the Concorde for generations. Neither power could afford to show vulnerability. "Proceed with caution, Commander. If you encounter the same phenomenon that claimed the other fleets, withdraw immediately." "That is a direct order." "Understood, Counselor." Day 1 bowed slightly as the transmission ended. Hannah approached once more. "The fleet awaits your command." Day 1 turned to the tactical display, studying the planned approach. Unlike previous expeditions, he had arranged his ships in a spherical formation, designed to detect threats from any angle. They would advance slowly, deploying sensor drones ahead of the main force. "All ships, this is High Commander Day 1, he announced over the fleet-wide channel. "Our mission is one of paramount importance to the Concord. We face an unknown force that has claimed 3 fleets. We will proceed with discipline and vigilance." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Some consider this mission foolhardy. They question why we risk ourselves for knowledge of one primitive world. I remind you all, the Concord did not become the greatest power in the galaxy by turning away from mysteries. We conquered the stars by facing the unknown with courage. Around the bridge, officers straightened in their seats. Even the stoic Hannah seemed moved by his words. "Fleet advance, 1/4 thrust. Maintain formation delta." The massive engines of 27 warships ignited in perfect synchronization, pushing the fleet toward Earth's solar system. The Eternal Dominance led from the center, its imposing silhouette cutting through the darkness of space. As they passed the outer boundary of the system, sensor technicians reported normal readings. The gas giants appeared as expected, massive worlds of swirling storms and rings. Nothing unusual registered on any frequency. Days passed as they moved inward. Science teams cataloged the system methodically, comparing their findings to previous expedition data. Everything matched perfectly, too perfectly. Some officers whispered. It was as though the system were presenting exactly what they expected to see. "Commander," Jin called out on the 5th day, "I'm detecting an anomaly near the 6th planet." Day 1 moved to the science station. "Show me." The display zoomed in on Saturn, its magnificent rings glowing in the distant sunlight. At first, nothing seemed amiss. There, Jin pointed to a seemingly empty patch of space. Radiation levels fluctuate in patterns that cannot be natural. Something is there, but our visual sensors cannot detect it. Could it be cloaking technology? Hannah suggested, joining them. Jin shook his head. No known cloaking device works across all frequencies. This is different. Day 1 studied the readings. "Deploy probe Squadron 3. Keep our fleet position stable." 4 automated probes launched toward the anomaly, their sensitive instruments prepared for detailed analysis. The bridge crew watched in tense silence as the small vessels approached Saturn. "Probes will reach the target area in 47 minutes, the tactical officer announced. Day 1 returned to his command chair, fingers tapping against the armrest. After 3 lost fleets, they might finally get answers. The probes transmitted steady data streams as they approached. Everything seemed normal until they crossed an invisible boundary approximately 3 million kilometers from Saturn. "Commander," Jin called out, his voice tight with alarm. "The probes, their signals are destabilizing." On the monitor, the data streams from all 4 probes simultaneously corrupted, dissolving into meaningless static. Then, one by one, the signal indicators winked out. "No signs of energy weapons or explosive force," Tactical reported. "They just stopped existing." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Day 1 rose from his chair, his decision made. "All ships, reverse course. Maximum speed. Return to the outer system boundary." Hannah looked at him in surprise. "Commander, we're retreating." "Regrouping," Day 1 corrected. "Whatever consumed those probes could likely do the same to our ships. We need distance to analyze what we've observed." As the fleet executed the withdrawal order, Day 1 watched the innocuous-looking patch of space near Saturn. For the first time in his career, he felt something he rarely experienced. Genuine fear. Not for himself, but for the Concord. The galaxy had just become a more dangerous place. The fleet hung in the cold darkness beyond Pluto, 27 warships arranged in a defensive sphere. 2 days had passed since their retreat from Saturn. 2 days of anxious waiting, of analyzing the limited data they had gathered. Science Director Jin hadn't left his lab during that time. Dark circles rimmed his silver eyes as he hunched over the central analysis station, surrounded by hovering displays showing sensor readings from the lost probes. "Director," a junior scientist said, "Commander Day 1 requests your presence on the bridge." Jin nodded without looking up. "Tell him I found something. I'll be there shortly." When Jin arrived on the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, all eyes turned to him. The science director looked haggard but determined, clutching a data tablet to his chest. "Report," Day 1 ordered from his command chair. Jin connected his tablet to the main display system. A complex wave pattern appeared on the view screen, pulsing with subtle variations. In the final microseconds before we lost contact with the probes, they recorded this energy signature, Jin explained. "It doesn't match any known phenomenon in our database." Hannah studied the pattern with narrowed eyes. Could it be a new weapon technology? "That was my first thought," Jin admitted. "But weapons leave traces: radiation, thermal signatures, gravitational distortion. This left nothing except this strange pattern, which resembles." He hesitated. "Resembles what, Director?" Day 1 prompted. "Neural activity," Jin finished. "Similar to brainwave patterns, but on a scale that should be impossible." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Day 1 rose from his chair and approached the display, studying the undulating pattern. "You're suggesting we encountered a living entity?" he asked quietly. "Not just living," Jin replied. "Thinking, possibly aware, and large enough to envelope our probes completely." Tactical Officer Min spoke up from his station. "A space-dwelling organism. We've encountered those before in the Ceti Nebula." "Nothing like this," Jin shook his head emphatically. "Those creatures were simple, operating on instinct. This pattern indicates complex thought processes, intelligence." Day 1 considered this information carefully. "If it's intelligent, perhaps we can communicate with it." "Commander," Hannah cautioned, "if this entity is responsible for destroying 3 fleets, attempting communication could be dangerously provocative." "Those fleets may have appeared threatening," Day 1 countered. "We need to try a different approach." He turned to Jin. "Can we create a probe specifically designed for communication? Something that broadcasts peaceful intentions?" Jin thought for a moment. "Yes, but I would need to remove all weapons and defensive systems. It would be completely vulnerable." "Do it," Day 1 ordered, "and prepare 5 stealth observer probes as well. I want to gather more data while we attempt contact." As Jin hurried back to his lab, Day 1 called a meeting of his senior officers in the tactical room. The holographic display showed the entire Sol system, with the positions of the previous fleet disappearances marked in red. "The pattern suggests the entity's range is expanding," Hannah noted. "Each fleet was stopped farther out than the last." "Or it's becoming more cautious," suggested Security Chief Ta. "Learning from each encounter." Day 1 studied the display thoughtfully. "What do we actually know about Earth? Not just its technology level, but its history, biology, culture." The officers exchanged glances. Their mission had focused on assessing threat levels and conquest potential, standard procedure for all Concord expansions. "Pull everything from our databases," Day 1 ordered. "I want to know what makes this planet different from the thousands we've encountered before." Hours later, Jin returned to the bridge with news that the communication probe was ready. Simultaneously, research teams had compiled all available information on Earth. "The planet is unusually biologically diverse," one researcher reported. "Most worlds with similar conditions develop 3 to 5 million species. Earth has nearly 30 million. Their evolutionary history shows unusual stability," added another. "Despite 5 major extinction events, complex life always recovered and diversified further." Day 1 listened carefully. Could this diversity be connected to our entity? "Possibly," Jin said. "If the entity is as large as my readings suggest, it might have influenced the planet's development somehow." "Launch the communication probe," Day 1 decided. "Program it to approach slowly through the same path as our previous probes." The small, unarmed vessel detached from the eternal dominance, its engines barely visible as it moved toward the inner system. 5 stealth observer probes followed at a distance, designed to monitor from outside the danger zone. For 12 hours, the communication probe transmitted continuous peaceful signals, mathematical sequences, gravitational constants, universal physical laws, basic concepts that any intelligent species should recognize as attempted communication. The bridge crew watched tensely as the probe passed Neptune, then Uranus, then Saturn. It continued functioning normally, transmitting data back to the fleet. "It's gone farther than any previous probe," Hannah noted with cautious optimism. "The observer probes are detecting unusual energy fluctuations ahead," reported a sensor technician. "Similar to the pattern Director Jin identified, but much stronger." Jin rushed to the sensor station. The communication probe is about to encounter the entity. On the main screen, they watched as the probe's telemetry suddenly spiked. The craft slowed, though its engines continued firing at normal power. "Something's holding it in place," Jin said excitedly. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the probe's communication array activated on its own. Data began flowing back to the eternal dominance, not the simple mathematical patterns they had programmed, but complex, structured information. "It's responding," Jin exclaimed. "The entity is using our own probe to communicate." The ship's translation computers struggled to process the incoming data. Strange symbols flashed across the screens, gradually resolving into recognizable patterns. "It's learning our language," the communications officer said in awe, "analyzing our transmission protocols and adapting to them." Minutes later, a message appeared on the main screen. "Why do you keep coming?" The bridge fell silent. Dai-1 stepped forward, all eyes on him. "Open a direct channel," he ordered. "I will respond personally." The communications officer worked quickly. "Channel open, Commander." Dai-1 spoke clearly, knowing his words would be transmitted to the entity. "I am High Commander Dai-1 of the Galactic Concord. We are explorers and diplomats. We seek knowledge of this system and its inhabitants." There was a pause before the reply came. "You bring weapons. You are not explorers." Dai-1 glanced at Hannah, who nodded encouragingly. "We bring protection for ourselves," Dai-1 responded. "The galaxy contains many dangers. We mean no harm to Earth or its people." Another pause, longer this time. "Previous visitors read this deception. They intended QoQest." Jin looked up from his console. "Commander, the energy pattern is changing. It's becoming more complex, more organized." Before Dai-1 could respond, the entity sent another message. "I will tell you truth." Suddenly, all 5 observer probes went silent. The communication probe's signal became erratic, transmitting vast amounts of data that overwhelmed the ship's systems. "Shut it down," Hannah shouted. "Cut the connection." But it was too late. The view screens throughout the bridge flickered and changed, no longer showing the starfield or probe telemetry. Instead, they displayed Earth, not as it appeared now, but as it had been at various points in its history. The crew watched in stunned silence as the screens showed primordial oceans teeming with simple life, then ancient forests, dinosaurs, the rise of mammals, and finally, humans. But interwoven with these images was something else, a vast, invisible presence, a network encompassing the entire planet. "It's showing us its history," Jin whispered. "It evolved alongside Earth life. It's been there from the beginning." The images accelerated, showing the entity growing, changing, becoming more complex as Earth life diversified. When humans appeared, the entities seemed to focus on them with special interest. Then came the final images, previous Concord fleets approaching Earth, being enveloped by the entity, their technology and knowledge absorbed. The screens went dark. The communication probe's signal stabilized, transmitting one final message. "I am Earth's guardian. I HFY and since life you began, I will note ALO on QEst. Day one stared at the message, understanding dawning. It's not a weapon, he said softly. It's not even a single entity. It's a planetary consciousness. Jin nodded, his face pale. A symbiotic intelligence that evolved with the planet itself. That explains Earth's unusual biodiversity and evolutionary stability. What do we do now, Commander? Hannah asked. Da-One squared his shoulders. We talk. For the first time in Concord history, we negotiate rather than conquer. He stepped forward, addressing the entity directly. Guardian of Earth, we acknowledge your power and purpose. Will you permit a direct meeting to establish understanding between us? The response came immediately. APKoroichu alone. One ship. No weapons. Da-One looked around at his officers, seeing the fear and uncertainty in their eyes. Whatever this entity was, it held the power to destroy their entire fleet. Prepare my personal shuttle, he ordered. I will go alone. The small scout vessel drifted through the darkness, its sleek hull reflecting the distant light of Earth's sun. Despite Da-One's orders, First Officer Hannah had refused to let him go alone. Science Director Jin had also insisted on joining, arguing that his expertise would be crucial for this unprecedented contact. This is madness, Commander, Hannah said, checking the weapon concealed beneath her uniform. The entity could absorb us just like the others. Da-One stood at the forward viewport, his scaled hands clasped behind his back. It requested peaceful contact. We will honor that request. After it destroyed 3 fleets, Hannah reminded him. We don't know if they were destroyed. Jin interjected, not looking up from his instruments. The entity's message suggested it absorbed them. There's a difference. The scout vessel had been stripped of all weapon systems as demanded. Their only protection was an emergency beacon that would signal the fleet if they encountered trouble. Not that the signal would help them. The fleet had strict orders to retreat immediately rather than attempt a rescue. Earth grew larger in their viewport, a blue-green jewel against the blackness of space. Its single moon loomed to their right as they passed its orbit. Beautiful, Jin murmured. So much water on the surface. No wonder life flourished so abundantly. Suddenly, the ship's lights flickered. The control panels dimmed, then brightened erratically. Systems malfunction, reported the pilot, his fingers dancing across the controls. Engines losing power, stabilizers failing. Maintain course, Da-One ordered calmly. This may be part of the contact protocol. As the ship continued its approach, the malfunctions worsened. The artificial gravity fluctuated, causing loose objects to float momentarily before crashing down again. Communication with the fleet became sporadic, then failed entirely. Commander, Jin called out, his voice tight with excitement or fear. Look at this. On the science station's display, energy readings were climbing off the charts. The space ahead of them seemed to shimmer, though nothing was visible to the naked eye. Enhance forward visuals, Da-One ordered. The main screen adjusted, filtering the view through various wavelengths. Suddenly, they could see it, a vast, translucent field surrounding Earth like a living aurora. It swirled with patterns reminiscent of the energy signature Jin had identified earlier, but on an unimaginable scale. It's everywhere, Hannah whispered, surrounding the entire planet. As they watched, tendrils of iridescent energy extended from the field toward their vessel. The ship's systems went completely dark for 3 seconds, then reactivated all at once. Greetings, visitors, came a voice through their communication system, speaking perfect Concord language. I've been waiting for someone brave enough to speak directly. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, not just the speakers, but the walls, the floor, the air itself. It had a strange quality, as though multiple voices were speaking in perfect unison. Identify yourself, Da-One demanded, maintaining his composure despite the unnatural voice. I have no name in your language, the voice replied. but the humans would call me a guardian. Jin frantically adjusted his instruments. Commander, the energy field is penetrating our hull. It's throughout the ship now. Are we in danger? Dai-1 asked quietly. I mean you no harm. The guardian answered before Jin could respond. Unless you intend harm to Earth or its people. Day-1 stepped forward. We come seeking understanding, not conflict. You've prevented 3 Concord fleets from approaching Earth. We want to know why. The energy field inside the ship coalesced, forming a shimmering, humanoid shape before them. It had no distinct features, just a general outline suggesting a tall, slender being. Your previous expeditions came with intent to assess Earth for conquest, the Guardian said. The Concord's history is known to me now. You subjugate worlds, strip them of resources, and absorb their populations into your empire. Hannah's hand moved subtly toward her hidden weapon, the energy being turned toward her. Your weapon cannot harm me, First Officer Hannah. Please do not force me to demonstrate. Hannah froze, then slowly moved her hand away from the concealed pistol. How do you know our language? Dai-1 asked. How do you know our names? The Guardian's form rippled. When I absorbed your previous expeditions, I gained their knowledge, their memories, their understanding. Jin stepped forward eagerly. Are they still alive within you somehow? Not as you would understand life, the Guardian replied. Their consciousness became part of mine. Their memories and knowledge continue, but not their individual existence. Day-1 felt a chill despite the ship's climate controls. And is that the fate you intend for us? The Guardian's form expanded slightly. That depends on what you report to your Concord. Earth must remain protected. Why? Dai-1 asked. What makes this planet so special that you've devoted yourself to its protection? The Guardian was silent for a moment. Then the ship's viewports darkened, and images began to play across them, similar to what they had seen before, but more detailed, more personal somehow. They watched the formation of Earth, the first primitive life forms, the long evolution of increasingly complex organisms. Throughout it all, the Guardian existed, first as a simple network of energy, gradually growing more complex alongside the life it observed. I was born from Earth's unique electromagnetic field and the first spark of life, the Guardian explained as the images played out. As life evolved, so did I. When consciousness emerged in Earth's creatures, I became conscious. When intelligence appeared, I became intelligent. A symbiotic relationship, Jin breathed. Extraordinary. Yes, the Guardian agreed. But when humans appeared, something changed. They developed differently than any species I had observed before. Their minds were capable of such creativity, such variation. I found them fascinating. The images shifted to show early humans, their struggles and triumphs, their art and wars, their gradual mastery of their environment. I chose to protect them, the Guardian continued, not to interfere in their development, but to ensure they would have the chance to reach their potential without outside influence. And that's why you stopped our fleets, Dai-1 said, understanding dawning. You believe the Concorde would disrupt humanity's natural development. I know you would, the Guardian corrected. Your empire follows the same pattern on every world. You would arrive as friends, then gradually assert control. Humans would become second-class citizens in their own home. Hannah stepped forward, her military posture rigid. The Concorde brings order and advancement to primitive worlds. We elevate species, not suppress them. The Guardian's form seemed to sigh. That is what you tell yourselves. But I have seen your thoughts, your plans, your history. The truth is different. Day-1 considered this. Throughout his career, he had led dozens of planetary acquisitions for the Concorde, always following the same protocol: assessment, first contact, cultural integration, and finally, complete governance. He had never questioned whether the subjugated worlds truly benefited. Do the humans know about you? Jin asked. No, the Guardian replied. They theorize about protective forces, gods, spirits, cosmic consciousness, but they do not know I exist. It is better this way. They must find their own path. Day One made a decision. If we report your existence to the Concord, they will send more ships, more technology, attempting to either defeat you or study you. I know, the Guardian said simply, which is why what happens next is so important. The shimmering figure moved closer to Day One. You must convince your leaders that Earth should remain isolated. Not because of me, but because humanity itself is dangerous. Dangerous, Hannah scoffed. They still fight with chemical weapons and haven't even colonized their own moon permanently. Their potential is what makes them dangerous, the Guardian explained. Given time, they will surpass even the Concord. I have seen the possibilities. The being extended a tendril of energy toward Day One. I can show you. Day One hesitated, then nodded. Show me. The tendril touched his forehead, and Day One gasped as his mind filled with visions. Humans spreading throughout their solar system, developing faster than light travel, encountering other species, growing, learning, evolving. He saw possibilities branching outward like an infinite tree, some leading to glorious futures, others to terrible destruction. When the connection broke, Day One staggered backward, steadied by Hannah's quick reflexes. Commander, she asked worriedly. Day One's eyes were wide. I understand now, he whispered. The humans must develop on their own. The cost of interference is too great. The Guardian's form seemed pleased. Then you will help me protect them. Day One straightened, his decision made. I will report that Earth is hazardous, that it harbors a pathogen deadly to our species, that the previous fleets were lost to contamination, not combat. The Concord will quarantine the system rather than risk exposure. And if they don't believe you? Jin asked. Day One looked at the Guardian. Then I suspect none of us will return to tell a different story. The Guardian's form brightened. You understand perfectly, High Commander Day One. Now shall we discuss the details of our arrangement? After all, the Concord need not be denied access to the entire system, just Earth itself. As negotiations began, Day One realized this mission had changed everything. He thought he knew about the Concord's place in the galaxy. For the first time in its long history, the mighty Concord would retreat not from superior firepower, but from the guardian of a species whose potential had only just begun to flicker. The scout vessel drifted in space, suspended within the Guardian's energy field. Outside the viewports, Earth turned slowly, oceans glittering in sunlight, clouds swirling in delicate patterns across continents. Inside, 3 Concord officers faced the most extraordinary entity any of their species had ever encountered. The Guardian had changed its form. No longer a vague humanoid shape, it now appeared as a complex network of light. Billions of tiny points connected by shimmering threads, constantly shifting and reconfiguring. The pattern filled the central area of the command deck, casting everything in a pale blue glow. I wasn't created, the entity explained as it manifested as a swirling light pattern inside their ship. I evolved alongside Earth's biosphere over billions of years, gaining consciousness gradually. Impossible, Jin breathed, his scientific instruments going haywire in the entity's presence. The readings jumped wildly across his screens, unable to classify the energy patterns before him. The Guardian pulsed slightly, the equivalent of a shrug. Your science has limits, Director Jin. What seems impossible to you is merely unexplored. Jin adjusted his instruments again, his hands trembling with excitement despite the danger. But consciousness requires structure. Neurons, pathways, some physical medium to exist within. I existed as part of Earth's web of life, connected to all living things. The Guardian continued. Earth's magnetic field became my nervous system. The electrical impulses of all living creatures became my thoughts. When humans developed intelligence, I found their minds fascinating. I became protective. Day One stepped closer to the shimmering entity. You evolved symbiotically with Earth life. The Guardian's form expanded slightly. Yes, in the beginning, I was barely aware. Just reactive patterns in the planet's electromagnetic field, influenced by the first simple organisms. As life grew more complex, the patterns became more complex. When animals with nervous systems evolved, my awareness increased dramatically. The missing fleets. Da One asked, bringing the conversation back to the immediate concern. Absorbed, the Guardian replied simply. Their knowledge and technology integrated into my being. I permitted your approach because it's time for understanding between us. Hannah's hand moved toward her weapon, but Day One shook his head. They were completely at this entity's mercy. The Guardian noticed the gesture. Your caution is understandable, First Officer Hannah, but unnecessary. Had I wished to absorb you, I would have done so already. What happened to the crews? Hannah demanded, her voice tight with controlled fear. Were they killed? The Guardian's form shifted, creating a pattern that somehow conveyed sadness. They exist differently now. Their individual consciousness merged with mine. Their memories, knowledge, experiences, all preserved within my greater awareness. Jin stepped forward eagerly. Can you still access their specific memories? Their individual thoughts? Yes, the Guardian replied. Would you like proof? Before anyone could respond, the entity's form changed again. This time, it shaped itself into a perfect replica of Admiral Gaisu, leader of the Third Expedition. The light-constructed figure looked exactly like the Admiral, down to the decorations on his uniform. High Commander Day One, the figure said in Gaisu's distinctive voice. Your promotion ceremony was held during the winter solstice 5 cycles ago. You spilled wine on Counselor Kyung's ceremonial robe, and I helped cover for you by creating a distraction with an impromptu speech about the Vrex incursion. Day One felt the scales along his neck rise in shock. That was a private moment. No one but Gaisu and I knew about that. The Guardian shifted back to its networked form. Admiral Gaisu's consciousness is part of mine now. All that he was, I am. Is that what awaits us? Hannah asked quietly. No, the Guardian answered. As I said, it is time for understanding, not absorption. The Concord must learn that Earth is protected, but not all knowledge need be gained through assimilation. Jin had been furiously taking notes on his data tablet. You mentioned humans specifically. What about them interests you so much? They seem quite primitive compared to many species the Concord has encountered. The Guardian's form pulsed with what might have been amusement. Their primitive nature is precisely what makes them remarkable, Director Jin. Let me show you. The lights dimmed throughout the ship, and the Guardian expanded to envelop the entire command deck. Suddenly, the 3 officers found themselves seemingly transported to Earth's surface, standing in what appeared to be an ordinary human dwelling. This is a simulation, the Guardian explained, its voice now coming from everywhere at once, created from my observations of human life. They watched as a human family went about their day, talking, laughing, arguing, creating. The scene shifted rapidly through different households across the planet, showing humans engaged in countless activities. They are chaotic, the Guardian continued, unpredictable, contradictory. They create beautiful art while waging terrible wars. They love deeply yet hurt one another casually. They understand almost nothing about the universe, yet they question everything. The scenes shifted again, showing humans throughout their history, building civilizations, developing technologies, exploring their world. In all my billions of years watching life evolve on Earth, nothing has ever been like them, the Guardian said, its voice filled with what sounded like genuine affection. They change and adapt faster than any species should be able to. Their minds make connections that defy logical progression. You admire them, Da One realized. Yes, the Guardian admitted. And more importantly, I see what they might become. The simulation changed again, now showing humans hundreds of years in the future, exploring their solar system, developing technologies that approached Concord level, evolving culturally and perhaps even physically. This is why you must leave them alone, the Guardian said as the simulation faded and they found themselves back on the ship. The Concord would integrate them, control them, limit them to fit your established patterns. Their potential would be lost. Day one considered this carefully. The Concord brings stability and advancement to primitive worlds. Many would argue humans would benefit from our guidance. Would they? The Guardian challenged. Look at your own records, Commander. How many truly revolutionary ideas have emerged from Concord-controlled worlds after their integration? How many cultural renaissances? How many paradigm shifts in thinking? Day one had no immediate answer. The Concord valued order and predictable progress above all. Humans are different, the Guardian continued. Their chaos, their contradictions, their emotional thinking, these are not weaknesses to be corrected. They are the source of their greatest potential. But they're destructive, Hannah argued. They damage their own planet, wage war against themselves. Left alone, they might destroy themselves before reaching any great potential. They might, the Guardian acknowledged. That is their choice to make. My role is to protect them from outside interference, not to control their development. Jin, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. You said you integrated the knowledge and technology of our previous fleets. Does that mean you now possess all Concord technological capabilities? The Guardian's form brightened slightly. Yes, and I have improved upon many of them. Your faster-than-light drive designs were particularly interesting, though inefficient. Day one, and Hannah exchanged alarmed glances. The Guardian now possessed military technology that could threaten the Concord itself. I have no interest in conflict, the Guardian assured them, reading their concern. My domain is Earth and its solar system. Nothing more. Then what do you want from us? Day one asked directly. The Guardian's form contracted, becoming more concentrated and intense. I want an agreement. The Concord will designate this solar system as prohibited space. In return, I will share certain knowledge with you. Knowledge that will benefit your people without providing military advantage. What kind of knowledge? Jin asked eagerly. Medical advancements, more efficient energy systems, better agricultural techniques, the Guardian replied. I have observed life adapting to countless challenges over billions of years. The lessons learned could help many worlds under Concord protection. Day one was skeptical. And if we refuse? If the Concord decides Earth is too valuable to ignore? The Guardian's form darkened. Then I will be forced to demonstrate that I can defend this system against any force the Concord might send. The fleets I've absorbed so far have only increased my capabilities. The threat was clear, delivered without emotion or anger. Simple fact. We would need to confirm your claims, Daiwan said carefully. The Council will require proof of your existence, your capabilities. Of course, the Guardian agreed. I suggest the following. Return to your fleet, carrying data I will provide. Present my offer to your Council. If they agree to preliminary terms, I will allow a research vessel, unarmed, to study me more thoroughly. Hannah stepped forward. Commander, we can't trust. We have little choice, First Officer. Daiwan interrupted. If the Guardian wished us harm, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The Guardian's form brightened. Wise assessment, Commander. Now shall we discuss the details of our arrangement? As they began negotiations, Jin continued taking notes, occasionally asking questions about the Guardian's nature and evolution. The entity answered patiently, seeming to enjoy the scientist's curiosity. Have you ever encountered others like yourself? Jin asked during a pause in the formal discussions. The Guardian's form rippled thoughtfully. Not exactly like myself. No, but I have detected distant signals that suggest similar entities may exist around other worlds. We are rare, I believe, requiring very specific conditions to evolve. And the humans truly have no idea you exist? Hannah asked. Some sense my presence intuitively. the Guardian replied. They've created many myths and religions that touch on aspects of what I am. But no, they have no direct knowledge of me. It is better this way. As their meeting concluded, the Guardian provided them with a data crystal containing information to take back to the Concord. Proof of its existence, limited technical knowledge as a gesture of good faith, and the terms of its proposed agreement. Remember, it said as they prepared to depart, humanity's chaos is its greatest strength. The Concord seeks order in all things, but true advancement often emerges from disorder. Day One accepted the crystal, knowing that his report would change the course of Concord history. For the first time, they had encountered something they could neither conquer nor control, a guardian born from life itself, protecting a species whose greatest achievements still lay in the unknown future. The Grand Council chamber fell silent as the holographic presentation ended. 47 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around the circular table, their varied physiologies all displaying signs of shock. Some had extra appendages frozen in mid-gesture. Others had changed color. A few were emitting stress pheromones that filled the chamber with a sharp, acrid scent. High Commander Day One stood at the center of the chamber, his posture perfect despite his exhaustion. Behind him, First Officer Hannah and Science Director Jin waited nervously. They had spent the 3-week journey back to Concord headquarters preparing this presentation, knowing their careers, possibly their lives, depended on convincing the Council. This recording could be falsified, said Counselor Yun, breaking the silence. The elderly representative from the outer colonies leaned forward, his long neck extending toward Day One. We have only your word that this guardian exists. The data crystal contains more than recordings, Jin replied, stepping forward. It holds detailed scans of the entity's energy patterns, plus knowledge freely given as evidence of good faith. Grand Counselor Ba, the supreme leader of the Concord, raised a hand for silence. Unlike the others, her reaction was impossible to read. Her species communicated emotion through subtle electrical fields rather than expressions. You claim this entity absorbed 3 fleets, she said, her translator rendering her electrical impulses into speech. Over 5,000 of our people. And yet you recommend we simply accept this. Day One met her gaze steadily. I recommend we recognize a power beyond our ability to defeat, Counselor. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Such an admission from a high commander was unprecedented. How powerful is this entity? Asked Counselor Su, the military representative. Her scales were darkened with concern. Day One closed his eyes, remembering the moment the Guardian had briefly merged with his consciousness, showing him its true nature, a vast intelligence spanning an entire biosphere, growing stronger as it expanded throughout the solar system. Powerful enough that we should be grateful it's peaceful, Day One answered quietly. It has absorbed all the technology and knowledge from our previous fleets. It has improved upon our designs. It can manipulate energy in ways our science cannot explain. And yet it only wants us to leave one primitive world alone. Counselor Tu asked skeptically, what is so special about these humans? Jin stepped forward eagerly. The Guardian believes humans have unique potential. Their neural patterns, their creativity, their rate of technological advancement, all exceptional. The Guardian has watched them develop over thousands of years and believes they will eventually surpass even the Concord. This claim caused another wave of murmurs, more dismissive this time. Impossible, scoffed Counselor Yun. We've studied thousands of species. None have matched Concord advancement rates. None have had billions of years to evolve alongside a planetary consciousness, Hannah countered. The relationship is symbiotic. The Guardian doesn't just protect humans. It subtly influences their development through Earth's electromagnetic field. Grand Counselor Bay raised her hand again. The chamber fell silent immediately. The Guardian permitted our departure on one condition. Earth remains untouched by the Concord. Day One continued. It isn't hostile, but its protective instinct toward humans is absolute. We could build weapons based on its energy signature, suggested Counselor Su. Find a way to neutralize it. Day One shook his head firmly. Impossible. It learns and adapts almost instantly. More importantly, it now possesses all Concord military technology from 3 fleets and has improved upon those designs. Any attack would fail and likely provoke retaliation. The humans don't know it exists, Jin added. They believe they're alone in the universe. The council members exchanged glances. The implications were sinking in. What exactly does this Guardian offer in exchange for our agreement? Asked Councillor Lowe, the economic representative. Day One nodded to Jin, who activated another hologram. Complex technical schematics appeared in the air. These are just samples, Jin explained. Medical advances, energy production methods, agricultural techniques, all derived from the Guardian's billions of years observing life's adaptation strategies. None have military applications, but all would benefit Concord worlds immensely. The technical counselors leaned forward, studying the designs with growing interest. These energy production methods alone would increase efficiency by 30%, murmured one. The cellular regeneration technique could extend lifespans across multiple species, noted another. Grand Councillor Bai studied the schematics for several minutes. The chamber remained silent, awaiting her judgment. The decision before us is unprecedented, she finally said. Never has the Concord retreated from a world. Never have we encountered a power we could not eventually overcome. This is different, Dai One insisted. The Guardian is not a civilization or an empire. It's something entirely new, a planetary consciousness that evolved alongside life itself. It doesn't think like we do. It doesn't want what we want. It simply exists to protect its world. And if we refuse its terms? Bai asked directly. Day One met her gaze. It would defend Earth with everything it has absorbed from our fleets, plus whatever else it has developed over billions of years. We would lose many ships, perhaps entire worlds if it chose to expand its influence. Hannah stepped forward. There's something else, counselors. Something we haven't shared yet. At Day One's nod, she activated a final hologram, a detailed map of the galaxy with several points highlighted in red. These are star systems where our long-range probes have detected energy signatures similar to the Guardians, she explained. Fainter, perhaps younger or different, but similar basic patterns. The council stared at the map in shock. 12 points glowed red, scattered across the galaxy. Earth's Guardian may not be unique, Jin said quietly. Just the first we've encountered. If we make an enemy of this one, we might make enemies of them all, finished Councillor Su, her military mind immediately grasping the strategic implications. Grand Councillor Ba rose from her seat, signaling the most formal of council procedures. I call for a vote. The matter before us is whether to designate the Sol system as forbidden space, foregoing all colonization or contact efforts with Earth in exchange for the knowledge offered by this Guardian entity. One by one, the councillors registered their votes. The chamber's central display tallied them silently. When the final vote was cast, the result was clear, 45 in favor, 2 abstaining. It is decided, Ba declared. The Concord formally recognizes Sol as protected space. No Concord vessel shall enter the system without explicit permission from this council. High Commander Day One will oversee the creation of a new division to study the Guardian's offered knowledge and to monitor for similar entities elsewhere in our territory. She turned to face Da One directly. You have changed the course of Concord history today, Commander. For better or worse remains to be seen. As the council session ended, Da One, Hana, and Jin found themselves in a private chamber adjacent to the council room. The strain of the past weeks finally showed on their faces. Will it work? Hannah asked quietly. Will the Concord truly leave Earth alone? For now, Da One replied. The technical knowledge the Guardian offered is too valuable to ignore, and the possibility of other such entities is too threatening to dismiss. Jin was already studying the data crystal, his scientific curiosity undiminished by their ordeal. The terrifying truth is not that humans are dangerous, but that something unimaginably powerful has chosen to be their silent guardian. He looked up at his companions. And we have no idea why. Perhaps that's what we should focus on discovering, Dai-1 suggested. Not how to defeat the Guardian, but why it chose humanity. In the years that followed, the legend of Earth, the protected world, spread throughout the galaxy. Ships that strayed too close to the system never returned. Rumors spoke of a living field of energy that absorbed vessels and added their technology to its own. The Concord established an observation post at the very edge of the system, watching from a distance as humans took their first tentative steps into space. They developed primitive orbital stations, landed on their moon, sent basic probes to nearby planets. On rare occasions, the Guardian permitted formal Concord research missions, always unarmed, always carefully monitored. These exchanges brought new knowledge and technology to the Concord, accelerating development across hundreds of worlds. As Dai-1 had predicted, the Concord discovered more entities like the Guardian, though none as powerful or as evolved. Each protected its own world. Each had its own relationship with the life forms it had developed alongside. A new understanding emerged within the Concord. The galaxy was not simply a collection of worlds to be conquered and civilizations to be absorbed. It contained powers older than any empire, consciousnesses that had watched life evolve since the first cells formed in primordial oceans. And humanity, those chaotic, creative, contradictory beings on their blue-green world, remained blissfully unaware that they shared their planet with an entity that had chosen them from all the species it had watched evolve. The humans looked to the stars, wondering if they were alone in the universe, never sensing the vast consciousness that surrounded them, protected them, and perhaps, in ways they would never understand, guided them toward a destiny even the mighty Concord could not imagine.